Ми будемо починати. Я буквально коротке вступне слово разом з колегами візьму, оголосивши першого виступаючого. У нас з вами, мені здається, надзвичайно цікава, важлива сьогодні подія. Ми говоримо про російські воєнні злочини і водночас презентуємо книгу «Найстрашніші дні мого життя». Це збірка репортажів нашого проєкту The Reckoning Project «Україна свідчить». Мене, власне, звати Ангеліна Карякіна, я одна із авторок і дослідниць проєкту, і авторок текстів. Перш ніж почати нашу розмову і представити всіх учасників, я би хотіла дати слово Любомиру Зубачу, заступнику міського голови Львова з містобудування, і подякувати за сьогодні можливість і нагоду тут з вами поспілкуватися. Пане Любомире, давайте вам слово.
Дякую. Хочу привітати сьогодні всіх учасників форуму від імені і цієї презентації, від імені міського голови Андрія Садового, від імені громади міста Львова. Для нашого міста форум видавців, книжковий форум – це давно вже є знакова подія, символічна подія, і цього не поміняє жодна війна, жодна агресія проти нашої країни. Єдине, що поміняється чи може помінятися, це тематика форуму, і цілком природньо, що і цей форум, і презентація, яку ви зараз будете слухати, вона безпосередньо стосується питань воєнного часу, вона стосується питань агресії, тих злочинів, які вчиняють російські окупанти в Україні. Мені видається, що це дуже добре, і ми вдячні, що журналісти, аналітики, вони зібрали інформацію про ті злочини під час першого року агресії, і це вже буде опубліковано. Дуже важливо, щоб цю естафету якісно так само перебирали юристи, правоохоронці, і всі злочинці були з часом притягнуті до відповідальності. Чим швидше, тим краще. Тому що, я думаю, якщо за результатами цих злочинів не буде забезпечено справедливості в Україні, то цієї справедливості не буде в цілому світі. Тому дякую і гарної праці.
Дякую дуже, пане Любомире. Я ще раз представлю наших учасників, передам слово Джанін Ді Джованні, яка модеруватиме цю дискусію. Пітер Померанцев, письменник, журналіст, продюсер в минулому. І співзасновник проєкту The Reckoning Project Джанін Ді Джованні, журналістка, письменниця, колишній воєнкор, Олексій Радинський, режисер, теж дослідник в цьому проєкті. Я дуже коротко скажу, наша дискусія англійською мовою. У вас є можливість слухати синхронний переклад. Ви можете взяти там, якщо я не помиляюся, для цього пристрій. Книжки також знаходяться там. Після дискусії у вас є можливість їх придбати. Ну, а я передаю слово Джанін Ді Джованні і будемо починати нашу розмову.
Hi, thank you so much, and please forgive me for not speaking in Ukrainian. I will do my best with English. So, at the Reckoning Project, we believe that facts do not lie, that facts are the direct route to bringing the truth to justice. There is a pathway for international justice, and we are on that road. We're driven by a deep desire to crush impunity. We believe that impunity thrives in darkness, and one of the ways of eradicating darkness is by reporting. The Reckoning Project was founded in the early days of the full-scale invasion, and it was based on Peter and my belief that we needed to go deeper than just journalism. We needed to get witness testimonies that could be admissible in the court of law, so that we can help prosecutors with their enormous job right now of prosecuting Vladimir Putin and his henchmen and women in the Kremlin and in his entire war machine. Very personally, a lot of this is based on my own bitterness at reporting many wars of which I saw perpetrators walk away and get away with the most hideous of crimes. We're determined not to let that happen. So I'm going to start out with our two researchers and Peter, Alexei and Angelina, and projects that they've been working on in depth for months, well, more than a year for both of them. They're extraordinary projects, and I want them to talk about how also your journey from becoming journalists or filmmakers to human rights investigators. I'm going to start with Angelina, who has a remarkable project which will touch many women and men in this room. It's about the attacks on maternity hospitals. Now, attacking hospitals is a war crime, and medical facilities. Hospitals, kindergartens, civilian areas are under Geneva Conventions protected. But one of Putin's hallmarks, which I call Putin's gruesome playbook, is to attack people at their most vulnerable, women about to give birth. There's something so raw and so vicious about this crime. And Angelina herself was pregnant. She has a beautiful little boy who I think just left, who was born during this war. But I want her to talk about what led you to this journey of reporting this, what you found, and the resilience also of the women who were determined, despite the lack of electricity, the lack of medicine, brought children into the world. I mean, what Putin is trying to do, of course, is to eradicate Ukrainian society, and you do that by children and babies. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us the story and the journey of this incredible project.
Should I go English? Yeah. What do you think?
Are people going to be able to get translation?
Yeah, I think yeah. Okay, I think I'll go English just for you to also understand. I started my project with Mariupol, the city that I really admire and the city that I fell in love with several years ago. And the story of elimination of Mariupol really hit me hard, even though I have lots of friends there, acquaintances. But I don't know, I felt the story was really personal. As I started, digging into bombing of the drama theater and other objects, I got to know that I'm pregnant. And one of the objects that was bombarded was the maternity hospital. So my investigation included the maternity hospital, but at a certain point, I thought that I can do more about the story, because it is now at a certain point it became really, really even more personal. As I started to talk to people, I was really surprised by the fact that they were asking me how I feel doing the story, being pregnant. But they were the victims, they were the survivors. The level of their resilience and the level of their sensibility or sensitivity, I don't know what's the right word, was so high that I was really amazed that I have no moral right to say that I feel somehow, hard, or it is like too much for me to bear during this period of time. So as I was working on that story, I felt that I really have to go through it. I really have to do the story. Because they survived, they were able to tell the story. Well, my story isn't that hard. I mean, having a baby during war.
But your story is hard. Your home was invaded, and you were. That's a real violation. I mean, and you yourself were pregnant. Weren't you scared? I mean, worried that maybe you wouldn't get the medical treatment that you needed, or worried about bringing a child into a war?
I always compared the level of comfort that I had in Kiev during the 9 months of my pregnancy, and all the services that were available to me, and the services that were not available in Mariupol at all, and of course, all the problems that I faced were like, come on, you can really do this. As I was working on the story, I was really amazed by the fact that this was not one-time attack in the history. Thank you very much for getting me in touch with the journalist and people in Syria, with Vaad Al-Khatib. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch a documentary called For Sama. Sama is the name of a little girl, the name of a daughter of a woman who is the author of a documentary. And she gave birth to Sama, to her daughter, in Aleppo that was under siege. And when we met online with Vaad, I said, listen, my conditions and circumstances in which I do the story and in which I have this baby are way better than your were. And she stopped me in that moment. She said, you should never compare all our pregnancies in Syria, in Chechnya, in Ukraine, in Kiev, and Mariupol. None of us should ever be in these circumstances, however gruesome they are, better or worse. And I was really amazed by the level of sensitivity the Syrian people had to what is happening in Ukraine. Later on, I also got to meet people in Chechnya who also were very, very sensitive to what is happening in Ukraine. But what I have to say about the bombardment of the maternity hospital in Mariupol, as I was doing the story and as I was talking to the women, it was not only one-time war crime, the bombardment itself. We can imagine that the bomb was dropped on the hospital on the 9th of March, and all the women that were there, it was up to 20 women, they had to go somewhere, those who could still do it, because some of them were really, really badly injured. One of them, unfortunately, was killed, and her unborn baby was killed as well. Her name is Irina Kalinina, and you probably saw this world-known now image of her being dragged on the stretchers from this place. They had to go somewhere, and they went to other hospitals. And they lived through another attacks in those hospitals. And as the Russians entered the city, almost all of them had to go through filtration. Almost all of them had to get Russian certificates and Russian documents in order to come out of Mariupol. So it was not only one-time war crime. It was, crime after crime after crime after crime. And so many things that these women and doctors and children had to go through in the first days of their life, basically. So this, I hope, with my story, and apart from the text that is in this book, there is also a documentary I'm working on, and I'm talking to these women, and I'm talking to some of these men who lost their wives, and I'm talking to the surgeons and to the doctors who were helping these women. The crimes there were so many crimes. These are numerous crimes that people went through. Really, I think this is something that we need to. We're looking like there was this bombardment or that case or this case. This is like a whole life with a number of violations and crimes these people went through that we really have to tell about.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you. Just a note about Syria and the Syrian people, and what Angelina said about Weil's film and how she told you, all of our pain is terrible pain. A delegation, we have 2 Syrians on our team on the Reckoning Project, very deliberately chosen because we're trying to prove the crimes that Putin committed in Syria, he got away with, and now he's hitting even harder in Ukraine. But one of my team members said, when the Ukrainian war started, Syria got pushed away. It really, aid money didn't go to them anymore. People forgot about it. Journalists stopped reporting it. But he said, instead of feeling angry, we want the Ukrainian people to use our pain and our stories to help them push the cause of justice even further. So your story and the film and the report is so incredibly poignant and really, really touching. Alexei is doing something which I think is groundbreaking and something that will be incredibly important in the future. And it's about the link between the ecology, ecocide, and war. And his very specific focus intensely, Alexei worked, as did Angelina, all of the Reckoning Project researchers work really hard, but he doggedly went after Chernobyl as a symbol of something that happened in the 80s, but not just that, what happened during the full-scale invasion and the absolute disruption of the Red Forest and other areas, which led to the rise of gamma levels to something like 28 times the normal level. But what in his film, which by the way is eligible to be long-listed for an Oscar, Chernobyl 22, it's a great film, he really goes into depth, but I think he's opening a door to many prosecutors and many people to look at how ecocide is a crime that is going to continue to happen, the threat of nuclear terrorism. So let's start from the beginning, because you really, you went after that story like a dog, as we would say in English, a dog with a bone. You would not stop, and you got many closed doors, and you kept going and going and going.
Thank you. Я скажу на початку, українською мені дійсно трохи незвично говорити в цьому залі англійською мовою, але сподіваюся, що всі, кому треба, мають переклад. Так. I just said I feel a little awkward to talk in English, but it's okay. No, they have translation. There is translation, so it's okay. Yeah, so when I think back to the moment sometimes when I was invited to join The Reckoning Project by Natalia Gumenyuk, the journalist, and Lubak Narazok, the producer of the project, who is also here. Cheers. So I've been thinking about three things when I was joining the project. First, I thought, okay, none of the war crimes that are committed during the Russian invasion of Ukraine should be allowed to go unpunished, or at the very least should not be allowed to be forgotten. Even those war crimes that have happened at the very, very early stage of the invasion and that were part of this kind of strategy to dump new and new atrocities deliberately to make the audience, the global audience, forget about what happened in the beginning. So that's one thing. The other thing I thought was that we really, as journalists, as filmmakers and investigators, should really take advantage of the vulnerabilities and of the failures of the Russian army. And we know that these vulnerabilities and failures are many. But there are some failures that stand out, even in this kind of feast of incompetence, of military incompetence that is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And third, I thought that when we investigate and document war crimes, we really should be careful not to portray Ukrainians and Ukrainian communities merely as victims of the war crimes, because this is really not the case. I thought that this should really be linked to stories of resistance, and which are many, as well. So, and among other things, these were the three kind of considerations that made me focus on this very early and luckily victimless war crime that took place basically on the very first hours, during the very first hours of the invasion of Ukraine, of the full-scale invasion, that is the military occupation of the Chernobyl zone of exclusion, and the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, of which I'm sure all of us know quite a lot. But still, when I started to investigate this story and document numerous witnesses that survived this occupation, it really occurred to me that, of course, we are dealing with the unprecedented at the time act of what we call, and what the lawyers call, nuclear terror, yeah? That could potentially lead to enormous consequences all over the globe, yeah? As we know, luckily, not a single person was killed in Chernobyl, yeah? But the potential of this war crime and the consequences of this, potential consequences of this war crime were immense. It's like millions of people, millions of potential victims we're talking about here. Then also what I was able to learn when I kind of really, as Janine said, kind of tried to go in depth into this story was that at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant there was an incredible case of kind of workers' resistance, yeah, towards the occupiers. We know that there were no military hostilities there because Ukrainian National Guard has complied with the protocols that forbid any kind of hostilities at nuclear facilities. But still, the workers of this shift that got basically captured and imprisoned by the Russians at the Chernobyl nuclear plant, who had to undergo an extreme stress of having to work for 5 weeks in a row without rest, without proper sleep. They slept like 2 hours a day and so on. They also found the strength to really, not just to kind of silently resist, but to actively blackmail the Russians. Yeah, so as we discovered, because like this whole invasion and the invasion of Chernobyl in particular has been a game of nuclear blackmail on the side of the Russian army, but very soon it turned out that nuclear blackmail is kind of something that two sides can play. Yeah, as we say in Ukrainian, це гра, в яку можна грати вдвох. Yeah, and the supervisors of this shift, people who were in charge of running the nuclear plant under occupation, they simply started to blackmail the Russians. They said, okay, if you blackmail the whole world now with like nuclear war or something, I can simply assure you that I have enough competence to just kill you with radiation here at this nuclear plant. And it seems that it's really played a role in not just in that particular situation at the nuclear plant, but more largely in the battle for Kyiv. Yeah, so basically my piece that is published in this book kind of deals with the role that this failed occupation of Chernobyl nuclear plant played in the battle for Kyiv that, as we know, has been lost by the Russian army. Yeah, and then, as Janine also mentioned, there is another outcome of this work is the documentary film that's already released and is now playing in film festivals. I hope it will be screened in Lviv soon, before it goes online. And yeah, just to wrap it up, I just gonna maybe share a little bit of inside information. I hope I don't share too much, but we are now, so because this crime was victimless, yeah, no one was killed. The Ukrainian law enforcement was very reluctant to prioritize this investigation, and it's understandable. Yeah, they have so many war crimes where people were killed, lots of people were killed, and understandably this is their priority. But during because we also try to work with the investigators and with more specifically with the ecological department of the Office of the Prosecutor General, and our international advisors also help us to bring certain information and analysis to these people. And it seems that their opinion is also starting to change. Yeah, so I experienced this kind of reluctance where the persecutors were saying, like, this doesn't have a future because no one was killed. But then it seems that part of our job is also to change this thinking that, look, no one was killed, but millions of people could potentially die, yeah? And it seems that this really may change, and I mean, I hope also Ukrainian law enforcement is going to very soon share, so to say, the optimism with regards to this case that our international kind of lawyers have, that totally say that you should go to every court to prosecute these guys, especially given that this is a very special war crime because every perpetrator is named. Yeah, I mean, we all know, everyone was established. All of the commanders of the Russian army who were in charge of the takeover of Chernobyl are established as public knowledge. You don't even have to investigate. Yeah, so hopefully this will also have some kind of practical meaning.
Thanks, Oleksiy. I'm going to go to Peter, but I first want to ask each of you, both of you, briefly, how was it to change from being a filmmaker and a journalist, an editor, a writer, a filmmaker, to a human rights investigator? How did you have to shift your mentality? And also, one other thing for you, we don't have victims yet of Chernobyl, but we don't know who died on the other side, the Russian soldiers. We have no idea if they're immediately dead or if they've developed cancer or other things. So that's part of the crime as well. But yeah, what did it feel like to become what was different? How did you work differently?
It's a different job, absolutely. I mean, interviewing people as you document a war crime is different than interviewing people for an interview, for journalistic interview or for a movie. I felt a little bit prosecutish, which is something absolutely new to me. I felt like guilty asking people so many detailed questions, like I don't trust them. It looked like I don't trust them because here's a person, you know, that survived, for example, the bombardment of the drama theater, and you ask him or her, okay, you were there, what time, where exactly, what did you see? You said you heard an airplane, but you said you didn't see an airplane, but other people say they didn't hear an airplane, you know, things like that. So you really need to be very, very specific. And actually, at first I felt uncomfortable, but as I was doing this job, I felt more and more fine about myself because I had so many details to prove these things really took place, and they have some legal power. So I really felt that this work was some kind empowering my journalistic work. I don't know how about Oleksiy, but it really empowered my journalistic work.
Yeah, I had the same. So first of all, maybe since day one of the invasion, I thought what would be the best way for me to put my skills into a practice of resistance. And of course, I thought that this project and also the training that we received, because we learned how to document war crimes specifically so that this documentation can be used in international criminal courts, was extremely useful. And also the work of the forensic kind of investigator, so to say, was something new for me, but it was also something that I already wanted to do for a long time. And also, I think I have to add, both for myself and maybe Angelina, both of us were also, during the last 9 years, we've been doing work related to Russian invasion of Ukraine in its previous stage. So Angelina made a number of films. I made the first film about the invasion in basically March 2014. So I didn't, in a way, I I felt like this is a new stage of what we've been doing for the last 8 years at the time. Yes, it didn't really feel something completely new, because we know that the war did not start last year. Really, at least I didn't. I had this feeling in 2014 that the war had started, and it's been with us since then. Yeah, there's a new war, a new stage, a new escalation, and for us a new reality and challenge.
But very quickly, I think out of something new that I learned from this work is that there is a human capacity to how much you can do of this. I mean, I thought previously in my work that I can interview like 10, 20, 30 people. You know, it doesn't matter how many. If I need to do 100, I will do 100. No, it's sometimes emotionally impossible. And the training that we had as how you work with trauma was actually very important, because at a certain point I really felt like I need to have a break. It's graphic when people talk about it. It's graphic when, you know, I mean, it's really hard. And I think all of the people who participated in this book and in our project and are still working and joining our project, they learn this. It's challenging emotionally, it's psychologically. It's a hard job.
Yeah, it's war crime investigators. Unbelievably painful, but at the same time, it's something hopeful in the midst of a very dark time, because we are trying to build cases, and it just takes one great testimony and one witness who can build a case that could be turned around. And again, what Angelina and Alexei are doing is groundbreaking stuff. She's linking Putin to Syria and to his past crimes. He's working on ecocide, which is a whole new legal arena, really important. But I'm going to turn to Pieter Pommerancev, who co-founded the Reckoning Project with me, and he, at the beginning of the very early days, like a week into the war, you wrote a really beautiful piece called Ukraine is Our Past and Our Future. And
the magazine gave the name. The journalist never gives the name.
But the essay itself, like the essence of why is Ukraine so pivotal, a war? Why is it so important for Ukraine, for the region, but for the world and for history?
Well, everybody here knows that we're sitting, around the corner from where Raphael Lemkin lived and studied, Lauterpacht. So Ukraine, and Lviv in particular, historically has been the place where evil takes place, but where evil is described and then legally defined, which is the first way to defeat evil. You've got to defeat it on the battlefield as well, obviously. But now it's happening again. I think it happened with Chernobyl. I think Chernobyl, this huge evil, helped bring down the Soviet Union, but was the switch that led to this new generation of the green movement, the concept of the Anthropocene, that we live in a world whose era is defined by ecological man-made change. I think Chernobyl was the beginning of a whole new way of thinking, which has now become huge politically, huge legally, which is actually the core of a lot of democratic politics. So there's something about Ukraine constantly playing this role where huge evil is committed, the Holodomor, much of the Holocaust, Chernobyl, we can go on, and then gives birth to these new meanings. And look, we can speculate why. I mean, Serhii Plokhy, in his wonderful books about Ukraine, will say that because it's on the border of empires, a lot of really bad things happen here, because you have these collisions happen. And maybe we could speculate, but it's speculation, that because it is quite near Europe, when it happens here, Ukrainians, others start thinking about it. Genocide had happened many times, but it's when it starts to happen around here that people start going, okay, we need to do something. And it's a tragedy that when it happens in Africa, no one cares. It's horrible. But Ukraine can then be can set heroic precedents. Yeah? I mean, that gives it a global role, and that's the positive side of it. So I don't know, I don't have an answer to it, but this seems to be part of the destiny of Ukraine, to be the place where evil plays out, where evil is usually defeated militarily in the end, but also where we find the meanings, both the stories and the legal meanings, to deal with evil. And I think at its best, law is about finding a codified way to deal with evil, giving it a language, giving it a way to punish it, defining it, and the stories that go with it as well. I mean, again, it's not a coincidence that the first descriptions of the Holocaust are being made by sort of journalists and novelists in this region. So I don't know, this is a mystery maybe in some ways, but this seems to be part of Ukraine's destiny and the destiny it gives the world.
I want to ask you something about the path from truth to justice, which is the core of the book. So you're an expert in Kremlin propaganda and disinformation. Can you talk about the Reckoning Project's mission, part of it, which is to counter Kremlin disinformation with the truth? And what does that mean, the path from truth to justice?
Oh, yeah? Is it better? Okay. God, it's just very loud. Is loud better? That's the question. What a very clever in.
Remember the question?
Yeah. Look, in what Russia tries to do, they are trying to both abuse language and abuse power. By showing they can say what they want, lie with impunity, goes hand in hand with the idea they can do what they want. You know? They want to show that they are so powerful they can lie in your face and that they can bomb a maternity hospital, blackmail the world with ecocide and nuclear terrorism. They go hand in hand. And accountability needs to come both in courts of law and in standing up for the truth and saying, no, your lies will have consequences. And the way you make words powerful again is by marrying them to legal processes, by saying, look, here are the facts, here's the case, this is what it's changed. I think that was always there. I think what we've decided to do is to bring those things together. As a journalist, and I know Janine suffers from probably even more than me from this frustration, you write great things, and they go up there and they're meant to change the world, and maybe they do, but so fucking slowly, I don't want to wait anymore. I think we want to quicken the path from truth to justice. And so, we're largely journalists, filmmakers, storytellers sitting here. But The Reckoning is a very big team, growing all the time. And the biggest team is the legal team, which is 6 lawyers now? 6 international lawyers, many of them with experience working in Syria. How many now? 15 you guys, 20 now, 35 Ukrainian researchers on the ground, gathering testimonies, gathering the evidence, witness statements largely. So it's this, what we're trying to do is get the witness statements to produce the stories, which will make the general prosecutor think about new crimes, persuade audiences across the world that Putin has committed egregious crimes over and over and something has to be done. But then we also have the witness testimonies that start to build the cases. So we're thinking through the whole chain, and I think that's a major innovation. I think that does make us very, very new, and we're learning all the time how to do it best. But Alexei talked about the success he's had with the general prosecutor. I really, really think it's so crucial to show to the public, and the public pays taxes, and the taxes define what a prosecutor in London or Berlin works on, to show that Putin is a repeat offender. I think this is so important, because if it happened once, bad, but why should we prioritize this? If you can show he did it in Chechnya, he did it in Syria, he did it in Mariupol, and not just him, the whole system that is responsible for this did it over and over and over again, and they will keep on doing it until we stop them. That makes it a much more powerful argument. So a prosecutor in The Hague, in London, somewhere else goes, we really have to do something about this. There's a demand from the public to do something about it. So thinking through these connections all the time, I don't know, I think we're making progress, but are we?
Yes.
Yes, we are. Sorry, yes.
Yes, yes. Which is something I actually was going to say. I know all of you living through war, it often feels like war will never end. It will end. And I just want to say that this is, in my 30 years of being in war zones and going through the international justice system, this is the most, this war is the first where evidence is being gathered as it's happening. Because most wars, it takes years for investigators to get on the ground, to begin to, and oftentimes the forensic investigators to search for mass graves or whatever, takes so long. And then it's a really long time before it gets to the prosecutors, a really long time till it goes to the International Criminal Court. There's already an office, an ICC office opened here. There are scores of other NGOs like us. We're all different, but who are working for the common goal of justice in Ukraine. And more importantly, what Peter said is so important. If we let him get away with it here, he will hit again somewhere else even harder. And I think there's a real united front amongst we call ourselves the accountability space, to nail him here. This is where it ends. This is where the impunity begins to be crushed. And if we can use Ukraine as a really important example for human rights and for dignity and for all of the survivors and the victims of his war crimes, then we can really, really make a difference. And that's what keeps me going. Are there any questions from you, all of you? Because I'm sure you have things to ask Angelina and Alexei and Peter about their process, how they work, their films, their written material.
Дякую, Юлія Зима. По-перше, я хочу вам подякувати за вашу роботу. Чесно кажучи, я не знала, що тут буде ще історія про Бучу, але це для мене дуже особиста історія, бо я там живу. Ось. І якраз от моя сім'я зустріла війну в перші дні в Бучі. Ми все це якби пройшли. Ну, це дуже особиста історія. І тут прозвучало кілька разів дуже важливе для мене слово, я думаю, для багатьох українців – справедливість. І от в кінці ви, в принципі, про це вже сказали, але все-таки частково вже відповіли на моє питання, яке я хотіла вам задати. Але от мені цікаво, мені якось перекласти, чи можна говорити? Перекладати, да, окей. Це просто є певний скепсис в суспільстві, що ось ми спостерігаємо, і ви ще більше, ніж ми це спостерігаємо в часі, що є там, наприклад, чеченська війна і трагедія там чеченського народу. І якби суспільство світове не прореагувало ніяк на це. Якби дало такий, можна це робити далі. Потім була Сирія. І знову, це не покаране зло. І тепер Україна. Чи вірите ви, що це зло все ж таки буде покаране, що Путін, і не тільки він один, але його там якісь поплічники, його там, скажімо, система, яку він створив, що вона все ж таки буде покарана, що вистачить європейським інституціям, я не знаю, як волі, сил, там, снаги і всього іншого, щоб довести цю справу до кінця. Оце від мене таке перше питання. І друге, це просто моє зауваження таке. Я дивлюся, в книзі є стаття, матеріал, який називається «Путінські війни Путіна». Війни Путіна. Але, знаєте, мені здається, що ми б мали би говорити, що це не тільки один Путін відповідальний за це. Бо, можливо, це зрозуміло, що він натиснув ту червону кнопку, яка запустила весь цей жах. Але в Бучі там ходив по будинкам не Путін. І там досі в окупованих українських містах ходить не Путін. І воювати йде там на війну, так, тобто там солдати, які йдуть в путінської армії, вони йдуть воювати, тобто це не Путін, це такий колективний Путін. Тобто це треба говорити про злочини не просто Путіна, а росіян в цілому, системи, пропагандистської системи, яка підтримує все це. Тобто, чи не здається вам, що ми трошечки якби зміщуємо акцент, що це якби тільки він винен в цьому, а не все, на мій погляд, російське суспільство, яке до цього, яке, скажімо так, дає теж добро на ці злочини, які відбуваються. Дякую.
I'll start, but then I want the other members of my team to speak. So I think your second question, we use Putin. Well, there is a reason for that. We want to get him on a crime of aggression. There is a special unit of prosecutors right now working very hard, led by Philippe Sands, who wrote an incredible book about the city of Lviv, actually, and the Raphael Lemkin. I think you're right. Of course, you're right. The guys on the ground that did the hideous things in Bucha and other places are the perpetrators. And they are people we are looking at, because when we take testimonies, the description of the people our witnesses give is of the guy that tortured them, or the guy that took their children away, or the guy who raped them, or worse. So yes, I'm sorry, when I say Putin, I do mean the entire machine. I can't speak for all of Russian society. I'm going to give that to Peter because he's more of an expert on that. Your other question, I believe, was, will justice actually happen? Something like that, right? All right, so we operate at the Reckoning Project under the ethos of do no harm. Above all, when we work with our witnesses, there's many things that I cannot go into here because it would take too long about how not to re-traumatize witnesses, how to protect them. And one of the things that we do is you can't promise anyone anything. I worked for years and years in refugee camps for the UN and other agencies. People ask you all kinds of things. Will you take my baby out? Will you make sure you get this letter? And now people ask, like, will the guys that did this to me get to court? We can't promise that. We can't say, absolutely, justice will be served. Because we're not God. We don't know what will happen in the future. What we do know is that we are collecting hundreds of human testimonies, which at a speed and a rate that I've never seen before. Because the scale of criminality in Ukraine by the Russian, I won't say Putin, by the Russian machine is enormous. So we are working incredibly hard, as are many others. And as I said, it's the only war I've seen where this level of dedication to collecting evidence and moving towards justice, there has never been this kind of laser focus. So that's about as much as I can say, we're going to get them. In my heart, that's what I want. And that's what we're working towards. I think you take the Russian society question and then...
I'll take a bit of all of them because they're connected. What do we mean by justice is really the question. So there's the justice of The Hague, which we set a lot of hope in, but is only one element. We talk today of a web of justice. So there are already cases that are planned to be open by universal jurisdiction, which is the idea that you can open a human rights case all over the world. Many groups are working on this. There's the justice in Ukrainian courts. So that's already the courts. Don't think of it just as The Hague and just as the tribunal, which is a huge innovation, the tribunal on the war of aggression. Think of it as a net. Think of it, and there's more opportunities for international justice than there ever have been in history. Yeah? That a Syrian general was found guilty in Germany is revolutionary. One of our team created that case. One who's somewhere in the back. But the fact that Pinochet was put on trial in Spain is huge. So there's a lot of excitement and potential for justice in courts of law. But at The Reckoning, we think of justice much broader. There's justice in terms of sanctions. There's justice in terms of creating more aggressive policies. There's justice in terms of diplomatic isolation. There's justice in the court of public opinion. So I would open up the idea of justice as wide as possible and see all these different paths to it. Yeah? Right at the top is the crime of aggression and The Hague. But that is not the only place. If we only invest in that, I think that's hard. I think there's so many other moments. You mentioned propagandists. So one of the projects we're starting, actually just officially started it yesterday, so really just starting, is trying to see how you could find Russian propagandists guilty of war crimes. Yeah? Historically, propagandists have got off. There's kind of two cases that I know, 2.5. One in Nazi Germany, Nuremberg, where Streicher, the really famous editor of the anti-Semitic newspaper Der Stürmer, and the Gauleiter of Nuremberg, so the Nazi head of Nuremberg, he was found guilty. That was easy. He was an insider, a decision maker in the process. He wasn't just a journalist. The guy who got off was Hans Fritzsche, who's kind of the equivalent of Solovyov. Head of the Reichsradio, or Kisilov. Head of the Reichsradio, 7 p.m. main show, spewing anti-Semitic aggression, calling for German invasions. He gets off. Free. Because what difference does it make? He didn't make decisions. You know, he'd just say, Goebbels gave me texts and I read them. What do I know? I'd never heard of the Holocaust. Awful. Oh, terrible. He gets off. There's one more case in Rwanda which is even less useful, frankly. So usually propagandists walk away saying freedom of speech, saying I just do words, words have no consequences, and I'm not a decision maker. We have a better chance than ever in this war, but also because of what we already know from Syria, but putting the two together to show how propaganda is integrated into war crimes, like the bombing of the Mariupol hospital. And we have more opportunities than ever before, through many different types of data collection, to show that the people who are involved in it, who fund it, who organize it, were conscious aiders and abettors of war crimes. So it's a revolutionary moment. And again, it's very interesting. We started doing this research in Syria as a community of researchers, and now it's very, very heightened. That would be a huge breakthrough. So about your question, who's guilty? So we can move it. We can move it. Obviously, the soldiers in Bucha are guilty. Obviously, their commanders are guilty. But I think there's a real chance to get the big guys, and there's a chance to get these new guys, the propagandists, the people doing ideology, maybe, the ones doing Russification, maybe, the ones involved in eco side, maybe. These are all huge steps forward. So it's very easy to get depressed. Every morning I get depressed. I completely know where you're coming from so badly. But if we turn it upside down, there's more chances than ever before. And it's still not enough, I agree, but there's more than ever before.
And remember that we have to link things systematically to Putin, in a sense, to establish a chain of command. So, you know, in Bosnia, in those terrible camps where 20,000 women were raped, it was Serb soldiers that raped them, but it went all the way to the highest level. The command came from the highest level. And in many instances, we've got to prove that these commands came from very high up. Yeah, it's the soldiers on the ground. But where are they getting that culture of impunity that they can go into Bucha and drive skewers through people's heads and torture them and do enforced detention, killing, extrajudicial murder? That's coming from a culture. So we're looking at the whole big picture. I don't know if you two want to answer, or should we take another question maybe? Do you want to? Alexei?
Я, може, додам щось, вже українською вже можу, так. Справді дякую за це питання, тому що це питання, ну, якби скепсису щодо результатів цього процесу насправді було з нашою командою також від самого початку. Тобто на найпершій зустрічі дослідників це питання піднімалося всередині, так, наскільки взагалі ми можемо бути впевненими в якомусь результаті, наприклад, судовому. Ну і, звичайно, відповідь на тому етапі була така, що, ну, звісно, ми не можемо бути всіма впевненими. Це, по-перше, не причина цього не робити, а по-друге, як уже частково сказав Пітер, судовий результат – це далеко не єдиний результат, який можна отримати завдяки такій роботі якби, з воєнними злочинами. Тому що, як на мене, мені так здається, або я, можливо, так хотів би це бачити, можливо, воно так і є, ця робота, вона не є суто медійною і вона не є суто юридичною. Да? Тобто ми говоримо, що ми працюємо з медіа, працюємо юридично, але також цей процес з переслідування, чи там, з розслідування воєнних злочинів, як мені здається вже тепер, є процесом політичним також, ну, в хорошому смислі цього слова. Тобто, якщо ми подивимось на перші ті дві повістки до Гааги, так, які отримав Путін і отримала Марія Львова Білова, коли я дізнався, пам'ятаю, про цю новину, я подумав, якби дійсно вони, це не просто якась юридична робота у вакуумі, да? Вони не просто автоматично там шукають, хто найбільш винний, вони також шукають, цей апарат весь, так? Він шукає, хто найбільш вразливий в цій системі, так? Кого можна напрягти, так би мовити, так? Створити додаткові незручності, створити додатковий пресінг на ті елементи цієї системи путінської, так, які, ну, можливо, навіть вони і не опиняться в результаті на лаві підсудних, ми не знаємо, можливо, опиняться. Але поки вони там опиняться чи ні, вони почнуть робити, наприклад, якісь дії, які внаслідок того, що вони опинилися вже в цьому стані, так, підозрюваних, звинувачених, які почнуть цю систему трошки зсередини також розкладати. Можливо, це, звичайно, трошки, як то кажуть, wishful thinking, так? Але цілком може виявитися, що це, якщо цю стратегію розробити правильно, а я сподіваюся, що, в принципі, люди в Міжнародному кримінальному суді, це люди, які знаються на таких речах, що ця стратегія, власне, буде таким чином і вже будується таким чином, щоб, власне, також розхитувати цю так звану вертикаль, в тому числі з приводу того, хто саме отримує повістку перший, хто другий, хто третій, хто 50-й, так, хто 500-й і так далі.
Я додам, я роками слідкую за процесом щодо вбивств на Майдані 20 лютого. І в суспільстві всі знають, в Україні всі знають, що були вбиті люди, що стріляв Беркут, але мало хто, попри те, що це відкритий процес, і він триває вже скоро 9 років, як знає, що за ґратами було 5 офіцерів Беркуту, 3 з них були обміняні, 2 в Києві і досі ходять на ці процеси, що ми знаємо прізвища всіх бійців Беркуту, які стріляли в людей на Майдані, і що це не якісь загадкові грузинські снайпери чи ще хтось. Коли стається таке величезне горе, така величезна трагедія, масове вбивство людей, звісно, це медійно людей потрясає, всі за цим слідкують, але далі оця нудна робота в судах, вона мало кого цікавить. А насправді українські суди працюють, і як би ми до них не ставились, і знаючи взагалі, як вони працюють, і суди, і прокуратура, ми навіть на цьому етапі через 1,5 року зробили просто якісь неймовірні прориви. Уявіть собі, зараз в Генеральній прокуратурі близько 100 тисяч проваджень по зафіксованих воєнних злочинів. 100 тисяч. Скільки? Можете собі уявити, скільки це роботи? Станом приблизно на середину літа Генпрокурор звітував про те, що 50 російських військовослужбовців отримали вироки в українських судах. Скільки людей знають прізвища цих людей, а вони встановлені, і вони українськими судами вже отримали вироки. Там далі система працює складно, ці вироки ще можуть кудись потрапити, цих людей можуть десь затримати в інших країнах світу, але мені здається, нам тут треба бути в тому числі трошки уважнішими і оптимістичнішими, тому що ми справді вже багато зробили. Ну, насправді, у нас іде війна, і в нас вже є вироки, і ми вже знаємо прізвища людей, які вбивали на трасі на виїзді з Бучі, людей розстрілювали, які розстріляли родину в Бучі, родину з Донецька. Один чоловік вижив, діти і мати загинула. Ми знаємо прізвища генерала Гостєва, якого СБУ підозрює в бомбардуваннях Маріуполя. Ну, тобто, вже через 1,5 роки, завдяки тому, що це війна з ніколи не чуваними і не баченими відкритими даними, можливостями слідкувати за цим, ми знаємо стільки, скільки, напевно, за жодну війну не знали про злочинців. І це не те, що має вселяти якусь надію, да? Це вже відбувається. Ми вже цих людей встановлюємо. Ми, напевно, не побачимо багато з них за ґратами, але один з етапів одна з складових справедливості – це називання, це проговорювання правди, це правда. Да? Ми вже знаємо, хто це зробив. І це дуже великий крок. Ми хотіли би цих людей побачити за ґратами. Можливо, для когось це буде, але нам треба налаштуватися на те, що, напевно, 100 тисяч людей або тисячі російських військових, які творили страшні речі тут, навряд чи колись сядуть за ґрати. Але принаймні ми будемо знати, як їх звати, їхні діти будуть знати, що ми знаємо, весь світ знає, як їх звати. І це вже дуже немало.
Other questions?
Yes, thank you for your great work of documenting crimes. I have a question, more like a comment, as some of you several times mentioned that it's never happened before that crimes are documented to such extent. And don't you think that there is also a risk to set it as a standard? It's definitely more than it was, but also we know that basically it was never a proper punishment for crimes like that. And even during the Second World War, which we refer now also some kind of standards, don't you think that it's a time also not to phrase it this way, that it's definitely more than it was, but if we said what was as a standard, we can stuck on the level of also punishing a couple of more people. And here is also a technical question, as Angelina just said, that we should be ready that all these thousands of criminals in the Russian army, they won't be punished. And part of it also is discussed by lawyers that it's technically not possible because current procedures are designed in a way that it takes way too much time. It takes way too much human efforts from the part of judges, so we can't really spend next 200 years investigating these crimes. So I was thinking maybe we also should start discussing about reforms of the system, so we now have artificial intelligence, we have some other tools, and maybe we should start designing how the system should be reformed, how it should be changed, so the standard is something we imagine in the future, but not something what was before, when it was mostly never punished for many wars from the past. Запитання в тому, що Чи ви думали про те, що формулювання, що зараз ми маємо момент безпрецедентного рівня документування злочинів, що це формулювання встановлює певний низький стандарт. Ми порівнюємо, що це вже більше, ніж було, але було завжди дуже мало. Тобто злочинців, покараних за злочині Другої світової війни, Балканської війни, їх майже не було, це були одиниці. І якщо ми будемо формулювати таким чином, ми теж ризикуємо просунутися лише на трохи. Чи ви уявляли реформи цієї системи, в тому числі і процесуальні?
So if you look at those wars, if you look at the wars in the Balkans, if you look at Bosnia, the ICTY, or Rwanda, which started so many years after the genocide, or other cases that haven't even begun to be brought forward, like ISIS, you know, the crimes of the Islamic State, their subjugation of Yazidi and Christian women in northern Iraq. Yes, then we say justice is incredibly slow. But what we see is now civil society working alongside lawyers and prosecutors in a way that I have never seen before. The ICC wasn't completely in agreement with this at the very beginning, and they issued guidelines that we should use, because you can't just send anyone into the field to investigate witnesses. You risk, as I said earlier, re-traumatizing them, and also having people that have been interviewed multiple times, and that means that it's a risk for the prosecutors when they actually get to court. What we've seen over 15 months that the Reckoning Project has been born is coordination amongst civil society, which we're constantly trying to improve by making partners with others, by honing our methodology. We have our own methodology, as does Truth Hounds, as does Zamina and countless other groups. But we're beginning to work with others to have a common database. So this is something very new. And I do think, I mean, I was in this city last March at a conference which was remarkable. I mean, I came out of it and said, I feel like I've just witnessed some kind of post-Nuremberg moment where the world is looking at justice. And it was a conference that brought together the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, all of the prosecutors of Europe, Karim Khan from the ICC. Basically, everyone was in a room in Lviv, and it was called Justice for Ukraine, and it was then that the decision to open the ICC office in Kyiv was launched, and the crime of aggression was put forward, which if it happens and it works, it will be the first time since Nuremberg. I see these as incredible leaps forward in international justice. Do we need reforms? Yes, but we're going to have, from this war, lessons learned for the next time. We are so much better now than we were in Syria, I can tell you. Data collection there, while the war was ongoing, was difficult because getting it out of Assad-controlled territory was really risky. Very brave human rights defenders inside the region-controlled areas had to literally put it on trucks in the middle of the night and ship it out. But then there hadn't been a lot of verification. So everyone who had an iPhone or a smartphone could take a photograph of a barrel bomb dropping in Aleppo. As a result, it will take decades for the prosecutors going through this to go through it. In Ukraine, that's been honed in an extraordinary way. There are devices, OSINT, tools that people have been working on that you can get collection on your phone and it's verified. So I see us as having moved forward remarkably in the 19 months since the full-scale invasion, and we will only get better. And we're working together in alliances with universities. We work with Stanford University, who of course are, you know, the gold standard of technology. We work with Yale Law School, which is the best law school in the world. So people are coming together for a common cause, and that's justice for Ukraine. So for one, I'm optimistic.
Мені здається, я трохи відчуваю твоє питання. Мені здається, що з одного боку, це безпрецедентна кількість задокументованих злочинів. Можливо, в нас буде безпрецедентна кількість вироків, ми не знаємо. Але з іншого боку, це безпрецедентна кількість проговорених історій. І ми говоримо не лише про, скажімо, легальні або юридичні рішення. Можливо, це безпрецедентна історія, в якій народ, переживаючи війну, в демократичній країні ще має шанс вже проговорювати свої травми, можливо, з ними, не знаю, прощатися. Я не знаю, чи можна взагалі з таким попрощатися, тому що теж не кожен злочин дорівнює травма, не кожна людина, переживши страшне, стала травмованою. Це теж не так працює. Але мета от цього такого екстенсивного документування, мені здається, в тому числі, я як журналістка, як дослідниця, яка з цим працює, вона ще й в тому, що ми сподіваємося не лише на юридичні наслідки, а ми сподіваємося на те, що люди, виговорившись, теж якимсь чином, можливо, відчують те, що називається, відділять цей досвід від себе і відпустять його там далі жити в книжках, в історії, в медіа, в історіографії. Тобто цим вже зможуть в майбутньому користуватися не лише юристи, прокурори, адвокати, а і письменники, режисери, художники. Ми не знаємо, що де може спрацювати, тому, напевно, занадто маленької кількості для документування немає.
Other questions? One more question maybe, and then we should...
Hello, everyone. My name is Veronika Smityuk. I am a lawyer. I came from Odessa. My question is about journalistic responsibility. Because to fix something, to fix some crime case or some story, what you think it's a crime or unhuman, you analyze it and you decide to explain or discuss about it with society because it's your own choice. And also we know what from our Ukrainian enemy, Russian journalist, there is a lot of people whom we can say what there are crime too, because information, how they speak about it, and propaganda. It's in the one case, it's a crime too. So my question is, what is for you human responsibility, journalistic responsibility, and how you think, or you discuss with your colleagues about it. It must be some responsibility in the court from this kind of journalist if we can say what they're a journalist. This is my question. Thank you.
Дякую за запитання. По-перше, невелике уточнення, що у випадку цього проєкту, Україна свідчить, ми не зовсім працюємо, ми не займаємося чистою журналістикою, так би мовити. Ми не працюємо як зовсім автономні дослідники чи журналісти у вакуумі. Ми працюємо в досить тісному зв'язку, в тісній співпраці з юридичною командою проєкту. Сраджі Абдул-Салам is nodding his head, the part of our legal team. Тобто наша юридична команда дуже щільно також аналізує, розглядає всі ті випадки, всі ті воєнні злочини з самого етапу взагалі виникнення ідеї працювати з тим чи іншим воєнним злочином. Тобто ми не керуємось виключно медійними міркуваннями, ми від самого початку керуємось також міркуваннями, так би мовити, юридичними, у співпраці з юридичною командою. Тому що це не просто медійний проєкт. Також ми мені здається, відмінність цієї команди. Я сподіваюся, що не лише... Я знаю, що переважна більшість груп і проєктів, які зараз працюють з документацією воєнних злочинів, вони вже пройшли фахові тренінги. Так? Тобто ми ті інтерв'ю, наприклад, якщо ми працюємо в жанрі інтерв'ю, так, то це не журналістське інтерв'ю. Це інтерв'ю, яке відбувається згідно з певним протоколом, задля того, щоб це інтерв'ю могло бути використано в суді. Так? І всі ці тренінги були дуже важливими. Я знаю, що і це не закид абсолютно ні в чийого роду, але на самому початку вторгнення, коли ще відбувався певний хаос, дуже багато, відносно багато ініціатив існувало, які робили дуже важливу роботу зі збору цих даних, інтерв'ювання свідків, які, на жаль, не відбувалися в відповідності до цих протоколів. Так? Це не знецінює цю роботу цілком, але це означає, що, на жаль, деяка кількість цих свідчень не зможе бути використана в суді або зможе стороною захисту бути відкинута. Так? Тобто ми, в принципі, працюємо над тим від початку, щоб ми уявляємо собі так, що буде суд, так, і буде сторона захисту у воєнних злочинців. І ця сторона захисту буде намагатися дискредитувати так всі ці свідчення. І наша задача, в тому числі як дослідників, зробити так, щоб не було можливим це, так, щоб сторона захисту не мала такої можливості. Так.
So we're always thinking, we do what Alexei said, we have a legal team. We're not the people that are legally analyzing the witness statements, although we can look for patterns amongst it. But what's really interesting is we're always thinking, what will Putin's defense be? So this is really crucial in our questioning and how we devise our methodology and our protocol, the questions we ask, which is a template, that our researchers go in the field. So for instance, right now we're working on child deportation very intensely. How would Putin defend this hideous crime of taking Ukrainian kids and taking them to Russia to be adopted by Russian families? How would he defend it? And so we think along these kind of lines because we work so closely with our legal team. And it's a whole, what Angelina said earlier, that sometimes she felt bad asking questions because she felt like a prosecutor. So it's not just the Russian soldiers came into the town, it's what were they wearing? What were their chevrons like? When you say they were rude, what exactly did they say? What does it mean? It's very penetrating, granular detail. So it's a whole different way of thinking.
No, I don't have anything crucial to add. Maybe Peter.
I mean, some of my best friends are lawyers. As a journalist, I was always very skeptical of lawyers. And lawyers were always very skeptical of journalists. We think lawyers hide information, are untransparent and biased. They think we take unprofessional interviews and re-traumatize people and ruin the crime scene for them. So here's two groups who have never liked each other.
Cat and dog.
Famously, journalists would come to The Hague and say, I'm not giving The Hague my notes. At the BBC, where I worked, like everybody else in Britain has worked there, you would never share stuff with a lawyer unless they came with an order, give us the evidence. The lawyers were your enemy. Yeah? So the small, but in my life, significant revolution of this project was to go, actually, we need each other. You need us, the lawyers need us to raise the themes, to focus them, to create pressure, all the things we do well. And honestly, we need them to teach us how to actually collect evidence. Because, I don't know, I've been collecting evidence my whole life, doing books and films. Now I realize I wasn't. I was helping somebody tell a story, wow, which is great, but we weren't really collecting evidence. And it is a really different process when you start to. So we've decided to put these two things together because I don't think the old system works anymore. I think if we want to defeat Putin and the whole culture that creates Putin, anybody who believes in democratic values, truth, justice, all these big words, we're going to have to start working together or they will win. And I'm just as worried as the other questions. I worry they will win. I have no sense of a guarantee that we win. Yeah? In Ukraine, in Syria, everywhere else. It could easily be the century of Putin and Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. Easily. Easily. And the quicker we start activating everything we can do, maybe we have a small chance of winning.
Okay, thank you so much for coming, for listening to us. Please read The Reckoning Project's book, The Scariest Days of My Life, and thank you for your attention. Thanks.